There's one moment in this entire Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni saga that completely reframes everything people thought they understood. Not a dramatic courtroom reveal, not a headline-grabbing accusation, just a voice memo sent on February 8, 2023, followed by a quiet text exchange the next day. And buried inside those messages is a single sentence that now reads very differently in hindsight. To understand why that sentence matters, we need to rewind to what was happening at that point in production. The film adaptation of It Ends With Us, based on Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel, was deep in prep. Justin Baldoni was attached as both director and co-star, playing Ryle Kincaid. Lily Lively was set to star as Lily Bloom. The production timeline was tight. Financing, locations, casting, and scheduling were already in motion. Then came the voice memo. Blake opens casually, friendly, warm. She says she hopes he's well. She frames what she's about to say as premature, reassures him that everything is all good, and then slowly eases into the real reason for the call. She had just met with the director of another film she was scheduled to shoot before It Ends With Us. That director felt there wasn't enough prep time and asked whether the other movie could push. Blake says she told him that ship had sailed, but then she begins layering in context. She talks about just having had a baby. She mentions not having secured a baby nurse yet. She references exhaustion, body prep, working out daily, wanting to be in peak shape for their film. She acknowledges the stress of potentially jumping straight into production without enough recovery time. She says she's panicking as the start date gets closer. Then the pivot comes. She floats an idea. What if they moved things? What if they shot in September instead? Or what if they moved a couple of weeks earlier? She frames it as flexible, almost hypothetical. She says she's not trying to move anything. She emphasizes she's not hustling. She even says if nothing changes, it is what it is. But she also makes it clear that having until early May is really important to her, and that, selfishly, adjusting the schedule would help her family situation, including not spending a full month apart from Ryan Reynolds while he was filming Deadpool and Wolverine overseas. The memo runs for over 4 minutes. By the end of it, even listeners have trouble pinpointing the exact ask. Was she requesting a delay, an advance, more prep time, a reshuffle to accommodate travel? She says she wants more time to get physically ready, but she also describes a scenario where filming earlier would allow her to travel with her family to London after her daughters finish school. The request exists in a gray zone, framed as casual conversation, but clearly tied to production logistics. Justin's response in text the next day is calm and receptive. He admits the first 10 seconds of her memo scared him, understandably, given that when a lead actor opens with "this is premature," a director's mind jumps to worst-case scenarios. But he thanks her for sharing and says he'll think about it. He mentions being sick with COVID, juggling kids, and promises to respond thoughtfully. Then, after midnight on February 9th, Blake sends a long follow-up message. She thanks him for his note. She jokes that maybe next time her memo should be 9 minutes instead of 4, and then she writes the line that would later become a flashpoint. She says she would never leverage the situation and would never hustle him. On its face, that reads like reassurance. She explains that she was nervous to share the idea because it was premature. She says she trusts their communication and didn't want to keep him out of the loop. She clarifies that her hesitation about filming now is tied to both their movie and her baby, positioning it as concern for the project, not avoidance of it. She even expresses disappointment hearing that prior negotiations had been difficult and says she wants to make sure everyone who helped make the deal work is appreciated. She agrees that any other movie would need to move officially first before they adjust anything. She says she doesn't want word getting out prematurely. She acknowledges that losing a week of prep could compromise him and insists she won't ask for something that harms the production. She adds, half-jokingly, that Ryan might push, but she won't. Then she repeats that she's excited, here to work, thrilled about the film, and not going to pressure him. From a distance, the exchange looks cordial, collaborative, two professionals navigating a tight calendar. But the timeline is important, because while she is assuring him she would never leverage the situation, other conversations are happening simultaneously, with agents, with producers, about reshuffling body-heavy scenes to later in the schedule, about maximizing prep time, about negotiating flexibility. That's where the tone begins to shift, not in what's said publicly, but in what's being coordinated privately alongside it. And once you see the overlap between the memo, the texts, and the parallel discussions about adjusting the filming order, the meaning of "I would never hustle you" starts to feel less like reassurance and more like positioning. Within days of that exchange, the conversation shifts from general scheduling to something far more specific: body scenes. On February 17, Blake reaches out again, this time asking whether scenes involving her body could be pushed toward the end of the shooting schedule. By then, she had already told Justin she was working out intensely, treating physical preparation like a full-time job. In messages to her team, she described working out twice a day, up to 4 hours daily, trying to get into what she considered peak shape after having just delivered her 4th child. She acknowledged the time crunch. She admitted it was a lot to accomplish in not a lot of time, and she emphasized wanting to be set up for success. The context matters. In her earlier memo, she framed the scheduling concern as partly about motherhood, partly about prep, partly about logistics. Now the focus narrows. She asks about shifting body stuff to later in the shoot. Justin responds carefully. He explains that there are a billion moving parts: location availability, other cast members, rewrites, production constraints. He says he can't promise anything yet because the schedule isn't locked, but he reassures her that she will look amazing, that any insecurities can be worked through creatively, that the last thing he wants is for her to stress about her body. At this stage, there's no hostility in the exchange, no shaming, no dismissal. If anything, the tone from him is deferential and encouraging. He tells her he just turned in a rewrite, that once he has even a rough schedule, he'll share it, that the team will keep her concerns in mind. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Blake is messaging her representatives about influencing the schedule more directly. She writes that she needs their help to board the movie in a way that ensures the more body-focused scenes shoot last. She acknowledges that Justin is being kind and supportive, but hasn't promised changes because of the production variables. She floats the idea that perhaps shaping the schedule now could inform how those other variables fall into place. That's the subtle pivot: publicly collaborative, privately strategic. Then comes another lengthy memo from Blake to Justin, responding to his reassurance. In it, she leans into professionalism. She says she knows her job, that both of them understand the assignment, not just as actors, but as producers and marketers. She explicitly acknowledges that the film requires a certain aesthetic, that the sexiness is part of the assignment. She even compares preparing for the role to training for an athletic event. Her husband, she notes, approaches certain roles the same way. The framing is important because it undercuts any suggestion that she was unaware of the physical expectations of the role. She says directly that this kind of preparation is part of the job, not problematic, not something she shies away from. She talks about meeting responsibilities with extreme work ethic, about looking for solutions to achieve high goals instead of lowering them, about both of them firing at their highest capabilities. And yet, threaded through that message is the repeated emphasis. She just had a baby. She needs as much time as possible. She wants understanding and support to pull this off physically. She says they're going to kill it and be so fit they'll need to be toned down on screen. What's striking is not that she wanted more prep time. That's normal in film production. It's that every layer of communication carries two tones simultaneously. One, committed, excited, fully aware of the aesthetic demands. Two, subtly pressing for schedule control, scene rearrangement, and flexibility tied to personal timing. And this all circles back to that earlier claim: I would never leverage, I would never hustle. Because at this point, leverage doesn't necessarily look like ultimatums. It looks like aligning multiple channels: direct messages to the director, parallel conversations with agents, positioning concerns around body image and postpartum recovery, invoking family logistics, even referencing Ryan Reynolds' filming calendar, all while maintaining the language of collaboration. Justin, for his part, continues responding with trust. In one exchange, when she reassures him she isn't leveraging, he writes that he never thought her intentions were to hustle him, that he knows her heart, even if they don't know each other well yet. He says he and his team simply wanted to make everything work because she was their Lily. That line, "because you were my Lily," captures how much the production hinged on her attachment. At that stage, replacing a lead actress of Blake Lively's stature would have been costly and destabilizing, which makes every scheduling discussion more consequential than it might appear on the surface. So what we have by mid-February 2023 is not a dramatic clash, it's a slow build, a series of overlapping requests, a director trying to juggle logistics, an actress navigating postpartum recovery while also acknowledging the commercial and aesthetic demands of a romance adaptation with a massive fanbase. No one storms out, no one accuses the other of bad faith, but the groundwork is being laid, not just for production tension, but for the narrative that would later explode publicly. And once casting discussions enter the picture, that tension takes on an entirely different dimension. Just as the scheduling conversations were unfolding, another decision point quietly entered the mix: casting Atlas. Atlas Corrigan is not a minor character in It Ends With Us. For readers of Colleen Hoover's novel, he represents emotional contrast to Ryle, the steady, grounded first love whose presence reframes Lily's choices. Casting him would shape the tone of the film in a major way. And on February 9th, amid all the schedule talk, Justin texted Blake about a potential offer to actor Isabella Merced, no to Stephen James. He tells her he's considering making an offer to Stephen James, noting that the character is meant to be slightly older, but that Blake looks so young he doesn't think it would be an issue. Her response is short and affirmative. Yes, he's genius. There's no hesitation in the text exchange as recorded, no objection, no indication that the choice conflicts with any creative vision she's holding at that moment. That exchange is significant because it shows that even while juggling personal timing concerns and body-related prep, she was actively engaged in creative discussions. She wasn't stepping back from the project, she was weighing in on casting decisions. But at the same time, the parallel conversations with her team continued. She wrote to her representatives about influencing the schedule, about sequencing body-heavy scenes last, about making sure she had the runway she felt she needed. She emphasized how critical the film's sexiness and marketing appeal would be to its success. That acknowledgement undercuts any later narrative that she was blindsided by the aesthetic expectations of the role. She articulated clearly that the commercial viability of the film depended in part on that presentation. What complicates everything is that both realities can be true at once. She could be deeply committed and simultaneously trying to restructure the timeline around her postpartum recovery and family logistics. She could believe she was advocating for quality, wanting more prep time to deliver her best performance, while also exerting pressure on a production machine that was already moving. The tension lies in how that advocacy is framed. In her long memo to Justin, she positioned herself as someone meeting responsibility with extreme work ethic. She compared role preparation to athletic training. She spoke about high standards, not lowering goals. She thanked him for understanding nuances he might never personally experience. She insisted she wasn't hustling. Yet, from Justin's side of the exchange, what he sees is this: a lead actress requesting potential date shifts, asking about scene rearrangements, discussing physical concerns tied to specific sequences, and looping in outside agents to explore structural changes, all while production logistics remain fluid. He responds with reassurance. He says he never thought she was leveraging. He emphasizes teamwork. He expresses gratitude that she included him early. The tone stays cordial, professional. But when people later try to isolate a single explosive moment in this saga, they miss what the record actually shows. There wasn't one dramatic break, there was accumulation, a 4-minute voice memo that never quite lands on a single clear ask, a midnight text insisting there's no leverage, follow-up messages about body scenes and scheduling variables, parallel agent conversations about structuring the shoot, creative engagement on casting atlas. Individually, none of these are scandalous. Together, they form a pattern, soft pressure wrapped in collaborative language. And that's why that single sentence, "I would never hustle you," carries weight, not because it proves malice, not because it ends the debate, but because when you line up the timing, the requests, the agent involvement, and the production stakes, it becomes the axis around which the entire early conflict turns. This wasn't about one rescheduled week, it was about control, over time, over image, over narrative. By the end of February 2023, nothing had publicly imploded. The project was still moving forward. The tone in messages remained polite. But under the surface, expectations were diverging. And once a production starts from a place where each side quietly questions the other's intentions, even minor adjustments begin to feel loaded. That's how tensions don't explode, they compound.